Good morning, everybody. I hope we're all doing well. Yeah, thanks for a few waves. That's nice. It's nice and reassuring. Thank you very much for attending. You are all incredibly welcome. Very much appreciate you taking the time. We know you've got packed schedules, so thank you for coming along. We appreciate the support. We appreciate the interest. Fingers crossed you will pick up some tips and tactics today when it comes to regular giving, and I'll include individual giving in that as well, because I think, as you'll see as the presentation progresses, the two are inextricably linked. Having a quick look over the attendee list, I think we've got a really good selection of people joining us today, which always makes things that bit more interesting. So thanks again. As ever, we are going to be recording this session, the purpose being so that other people can have a listen after the event, and of course you can watch it again if you would like.
Sorry?
Can I ask
Going to go
just
into
very
webinar.
quickly, can you put on mute for well, for the majority of the presentation, and we will be having a bit of a Q&A towards the end. So just to flag, if you don't mind doing that, that would be fantastic. I think, shall we give another minute for any latecomers to wriggle on through, and I will share my screen and get the presentation going. Just one more request for people to put themselves on mute, if you don't mind, just so there's not the rattling and the cats, dogs, delivery men, and so on distracting. Okay.
Oh no, that'd be good.
Are we good? Excellent. Okay, so this is just our privacy information. You can obviously have a read of that after the event. And if you need any more information, you can drop us a wee line at dataprotection@pebblebbeachfundraising.com. So let's get into it. A couple of objectives that I would like to share today. So yes, I want you to be able to go away with a bit of an update on what we offer as Pebble Beach. It's a really robust regular giving audit. So you can see the whole picture when it comes to regular giving. You'll see why that's so important, I think, a wee bit later on. Also, I want to give you hints and tips on creating that sort of a really practical and really successful regular giving program based on what we've developed as our sort of model. Essentially, when it comes to regular giving, just to give you a wee bit of background on my experience, this is all based on really setting up regular giving programs pretty much from scratch for organisations such as Maggie Centres and also Northern Ireland Transport and Stroke. So we'll be picking bits, we'll be picking highlights from those that I can share with you.
All right. Oh, because it's Phil, it's on Phil. Oh, yeah.
Guys, I'm going to ask again, can you put yourselves on mute? Couple of each team do it.
Around 8 hours. Oh no, this is somebody else on the end.
Yeah, we modern. Okay, so today we're going to have a very, very quick look at COVID-19, the effect of the pandemic on regular giving. It's interesting, there's really not oodles of information out there yet on it, where there are with different fundraising areas. We'll be doing the getting to know you with the audits. We'll be looking at the program highlights, and then over to you. You guys can chip in, ask questions, feedback, and then of course please do get in touch after the session. Okay, so I think actually one thing, just to define what we're going to talk about today. So for the purposes of today's session, regular givers, they're donors who have signed up for a regular payment whether that's deducted monthly, quarterly, or annually, and that can be from a bank account or a credit card. This might seem glaringly obvious. I appreciate that. I just want to emphasize that payroll giving is excluded today. I'm not going to touch on it. And that really is a whole other session, a whole beast to itself. And then it's probably worth touching on, I'm sure, again, a lot of you will be very aware of what the benefits of regular giving is. I think some people have the perspective that it is sort of the holy grail of individual giving, although I'm sure that could be challenged somewhat by amazing legacy fundraisers out there. But really, I suppose the whole focus is about moving individual supporters onto that program. It's about delivering steady, reliable, long-term income that's also efficient to process and administer, which makes it quite different, I think, in many ways to other fundraising activities. For example, legacies, which can be incredibly volatile. What it means is that obviously your organization can plan that bit more effectively, what activity it can deliver, and rely on that income to come through. I don't know if you guys will have experienced it. I think you may have. We often find it captures the imagination of board members, trustees, and they come up with that scenario of what we need is, 5,000 regular givers given £10 a month. How lovely would that be? But that's not the reality of regular giving. So when it comes to COVID-19, we know, I know it's a cliche to say that the pandemic brought about unprecedented times. It's really difficult to appreciate the really complex impact that it's had on the charity sector as a whole, fundraising, regular giving. The bits that are indisputable are that obviously we've seen a drop in income for charities, and then combined with the increased reliance essentially on charities and the state by the public. But so let's have a wee look at drilling down into regular giving. So as I said, the research in this area, or when researching, sorry, for this today, what I came across was nowhere near as plentiful as some of the other areas. I will say that there's some really good information out there provided by NICFA's individual giving survey, but that is, I'm sorry to be biased at this point, but that is Northern Ireland specific. So what I have unearthed is some information from Val data, and unsurprisingly, and I don't think anybody would be astonished by this revelation, but almost a quarter of regular gifts were cancelled in March 2020 in comparison to the previous year. But what's really interesting is when we have a look at analysing the numbers right up to July 2020, we can see that cancellations are actually down year on year. So the reduction in volume that we saw in that March, it went down through May and June, and you can see here in terms of those figures. So interesting, we had the big spike and then it dropped, but then we start seeing this sort of, in this diagram, we see the curve where it uplifts in July. So it's easy to assume at this point that this is still about a reaction to the virus and economic uncertainty and fears and concerns. Well, actually, what's really interesting is when we compare this to acquisition trends. So you'll see here in this diagram that we have the new regular gifts set up, and we have the cancellations tracked alongside that. So contrary how it looked at first glance, the rise in cancellations is actually, it's really down to something a bit more positive. It's actually indicative that charities are moved at this point back into sort of acquisition activity when it comes to regular giving. So the regular giving cancellations, outside earlier on, was really a knee-jerk reaction, and then the fact that they have remained constant, but it shows it's directly in line with the acquisition activity. I think Val data also highlighted their experience, particularly with upgrade campaigns, in that they have been working extremely well for charities. I think the interpretation being that the desire to help is there and it's carrying through into regular giving for regular giving audiences, and that remains strong. Right, well, lovely, nice diagrams, thank you. So what does this mean for you, me, our charities and organizations? Well, I think what I'm taking away from it is that the competition out there are working really hard to retain ground or regain that ground that they lost initially. And I think the other learning would be that we're all going to have to work that bit smarter, get those budgets working harder. And the other element is that the aftermath of the pandemic, it provides a rare and this provides like a really profound opportunity to talk to our supporters about community giving and the importance of it. You know, the experience has absolutely showcased why charities need that reliable income that they can continue to build their activity on. Okie dokie. Maybe we'll touch on that a wee bit more towards the end. So I have a question for you, and I want you, in your heart of hearts, I want you to be as honest with yourself as you possibly can. And I very much appreciate you being here today. So this is just to give you some food for thought. But there we go. We're at the top of a mountain. I want to know, what can you tell me? And I'm not going to ask you to put it in comments or anything like that. Maybe think about it towards the end of the session. But what can you tell me about your regular givers? I really want to understand if you have a real sense of who they are. And again, I'm very much basing this on my experience of fundraising directly, is that sometimes regular givers can be treated a bit like this sort of homogenous group, where, or dare I say it, they can be seen as a bit of an administrative burden almost, especially when it comes to submitting that IDIS file every month. Perhaps I'm being very cynical, but I think what I've often found is that it's really, organizations can struggle with really understanding the regular givers, even when it comes to how long they've been on board, attrition rates, values, whereabouts they sit in your donor pyramid, what are the patterns and trends that you have experienced with regular giving over the years, your relationship with them, how they connect to you. I mean, there's so much in there to unpack. So really, just to let you know, this is something we can help with, and we can help in, you know, different ways. We can give you the gold standard, and this is what I'll be describing. But really, what this means is, so we will be coming in, doing the heavy lifting when it comes to really getting to know your regular givers. Essentially, we'll work with you. We'll build a really solid evidence-based review, getting to the point of what the absolute crux of what matters whenever it comes to building your foundation for your regular giving program, because every organization is different. Will really help, obviously, with your understanding of your regular givers, looking specifically at not just what you've achieved, what you've raised, but dare I say, more importantly, thinking about the potential your organization has about regular giving. And that's not just, we'll principally focus on the individual giving audience, but we can also extend that to some community activity and corporates, of course, as well. So then we would be, from that information, we would be gathering together the foundations for your regular giving program. I'll touch on some of those specific elements, the ones that I have highlighted as being key. But we will also identify which activities justify the investment that would need to be made and the priority order in which they deserve to be delivered. And then when it comes to looking at your I suppose it's your internal environment, to see how we can embed this new program, what the internal structure looks like, what processes you have in place, what they need to be, and the resource potentially that you might need to best deliver this new model. Okay, well, that sounds Great. What do I need to do? What would be involved? So this is a bit of a foolproof formula for us. We've done this with a good number of clients, and we always follow sort of similar stages. The first being gathering all that information. So that's going to look at historic stuff. We're also going to look at interviewing sort of key stakeholders and staff with that information gathering element. We really need to understand your organisation, the challenges you face, the views of those people. So obviously in the day and age of Zoom or Teams, we can spend some time interviewing specific key members of staff. They might be members of the fundraising team, your IG team, supporter services, the finance team, I think would be very important. We also would look to speak to our volunteer lead, especially when it comes to regular giving recruitment, and a trustee service team member. So all good stuff. The second stage would be for us to pull all that together. We would be looking to understand, obviously, the implications for future RD activity. And then the final stage is to collate all of that in a report and a presentation. It's very much a collaborative exercise. We would be in contact regularly, making sure that what our recommendations are in line with the organisation's expectations and culture. And then just to touch on a few of the key areas that I think are worth emphasising. So when it comes to supporter touchpoints, again, I think it's fair to say that organisations quite often don't have a really firm grasp of this, and which can mean that they lose out when it comes to opportunities, specifically with regard to fundraising, donations, but specifically regular giving. So we would work to provide like a really holistic view of all the different opportunities that could afford successful regular giving recruitment at your organisation. So when a supporter has that motivation to sort of move to the next stage, to become further involved, we will help harness that. And the commitment and enhance how regular giving is being represented across the team. When it comes to promotion, I suppose we'll be looking at what you've done before. We want to see what's you've done well, what can be improved on quickly and easily. And we'll be looking across, a multitude of channels. So that would include telephone or printed material, digital, all sorts of channels. When it comes to processes, this can be pretty tricky. I think it's fair to say, certainly from the start to the finish. And it can be really difficult, I think, to be objective when you're reviewing stuff internally. So the really neat thing we can do is help map and then improve systems, processing, reporting, communication flows, all the way from setup to the collection of funds, effective handling of cancellations, and managing lapsers, for example. And we also recognise we need to bring the whole team on that journey. This isn't a case of doling out procedures that need to be adhered to. It's a case of bringing everybody together to recognise their contribution as well to this very important income stream. Feedback and complaints. I think it's more than likely with regular giving, you do tend to experience an increase in feedback and sometimes complaints, and especially with a renewed focus on regular giving recruitment. So we would be in a position to provide recommendations how you could improve handling of such things, because that is obviously crucial, and ensuring that supportive services are geared up to be that sort of key contact, and sort of to really improve the quality of the donor journey is extremely important. So this is about making sure people are briefed, making sure people are clear as to objectives and plans, again, the role that they're playing, but we can help really enhance that. So again, moving on to the next point, which is reporting. This one can again be a bit mind-blowing when it comes to regular giving in terms of what can be reported on, what is reported on, how data is managed currently, lag times, all the rest. but we can help you shape your sort of the culture of reporting, ensuring that people have the information that they need when they need it. So we have a whole raft of practical targets and key performance indicators and reporting tools that will help demonstrate the effectiveness of your new regular giving activity. And of course, they relate to income, expenditure, attrition, supporter care indicators as well. And then finally, in terms of the sort of the big chunky considerations that we'll be looking at is compliance, which is obviously a whole other ballgame. But this will come out in terms of reviewing your processes, your materials, the training elements that might need done. So we're thinking about things like the use of the direct debit guarantee or advance notice correspondence, refund handling, making sure that you're doing everything in line with financial legislation. And the guidance we provide is really straightforward, it's really simple, and you can apply it ASAP and plug any gaps. So, all sounds pretty good. So this is moving on to the program itself. I feel like this is always a bit of a misnomer when it comes to describing the situation, because realistically, regular giving can't exist on its own, in its own little bubble. It doesn't do that. In order to be successful, it has to sit within a really robust individual giving program. However, we will focus on the key regular giving elements today. So at times, I think people do overcomplicate the situation when it comes to regular giving. And in my mind, the most simple way of thinking about it is always that it's a really simple matrix. Literally, you've got your development, you've got your recruitment activity, and both of those generate regular giving and cash. No matter what you do, whether you do regular giving recruitment, you will generate cash gifts. So, and vice versa, it does happen. So, for me, the big question, well, there's lots of big chunky questions. One big question is striking the balance between what you can do in-house, what you can do with the team you have, volunteer support, or what external or agency support that you might require, because this stuff is time consuming, and to get it right, you do need to make that investment of time. So invariably, Pebble Beach's recommendations are based on introducing this really structured program to support the development of existing donors, and that's both cash and regular givers, alongside a test plan for donor recruitment. I think it's also worth mentioning that having some kind of understanding of the future need of services is also crucial, because this might precipitate, for example, if you have some kind of, I don't know, say a capital appeal or something coming up that's requiring chunky investment, it may lead to a real sort of investment in donor acquisition to build your supporter database. If that's not the case, if you want to focus more on development, that's fine, you can understand that. Okay, so what is with the big focus on cash supporters? So obviously I've touched on cash here. So cash, again, I'm going to clarify it, but cash refers to people whose preference is to give a series of occasional donations, whether that's checks, and it's often in response to an appeal. As I said before, cash activity has to be included for every successful regular giving program, because a lot of regular giving is dependent on that two-stage activity where responders are approached and asked to give, and then they're asked again to convert to a more committed type of giving. Again, we recognise that your charity will have a very distinct culture. fundraising will be at the heart of this culture, but we recognise that the fundraising activities that we recommend won't be overly intrusive. And the model that we provide you or support you on is very much aimed to reflect this. What we want to do is create something that's engaging and inspiring, and will be extremely effective for you. The other thing we'd strongly recommend is a real mix of channels. Obviously, the danger can be on occasion that you put too many eggs in one basket. So it's worth thinking about balance when it comes to that. Okay, so similar to the audit elements, I'm going to touch on some of the channel considerations here before I touch on the specific activities. So again, I'm sure you have a range of activity that involves all of these channels, but when it comes to regular giving, it's worth thinking about a few different things. So when it comes to mail activity, many of you who have worked with us, you know that with direct mail, we have delivered hugely successful campaigns. I think it's well over 200 now over the last 13 years. And what that can often be about is delivering immediate cash income, but also we can develop that into a regular giving ask. Most of the activity that I would recommend is based on outsourcing to an agency. I think just because there's so many other elements to contend with when it comes to regular giving. Maybe some of the smaller elements, such as like retention, sort of communications, whether that's little postcards or emails and so on, that can all be managed in-house by staff or volunteers, but often worth developing alongside other products. So really this is about us using direct mail to then build a multimedia campaign, which gives the donors the opportunity to make a specific tangible ask. And I think where I saw the greatest impact of this was whenever I was working at Northern Ireland Hospice, and I worked alongside Pebble Beach to generate a really successful cash program, and the uplift was absolutely significant. Okay, when it comes to telephone activity, so the option there is you could have fundraising and stewardship phone calls being made by staff, volunteers, or again, a professional telemarketing agency. Now, that's not something we deliver as Pebble Beach, but we can definitely signpost in the right direction of quality telemarketing, external support. So there's definitely different considerations with this. Because if you go to an external agency, you will essentially have, a much shorter and much more compact and efficient campaign, and the associated processes will likely be that bit more efficient. Whenever it comes to doing these things in-house, it can take that little bit longer. Again, I have direct experience of both, and there are positives and minuses. Evidently, budget is a huge element here. Another thing to flag is that contact rates are absolutely key. They're a key KPI when it comes to phone activity. And it's worth emphasising with all phone activity, callers should have access to existing gift data and really, really clear, compelling ask levels. And that's something, again, that we can work with you on. The other thing I would strongly recommend, whether you're doing this in-house agency, is that you have very, very effective regular training of your callers. It doesn't matter who they are. I think it always helps to refresh with those key messages and what the expectations are, what the objectives are. And again, that's something we can help with in terms of just having those messages refreshed and front of mind. Because telephone activity, you've only got a really short space of time really to make that impact. So you want your callers to be as effective as possible. The other thing I'd recommend is, if you can, is to do some call listening. So essentially that's where you're able to, it's really a tool that helps you ensure quality and addressing any sort of queries that might arrive or things that you haven't anticipated or expected. Again, definitely worth doing very, very regularly and being stringent with it. So yes, whatever you select when it comes to phone activity, we can support with script development, caller training, objection handling, which is absolutely key. Obviously complaint handling too. You want people to be empowered to be able to respond effectively immediately. We can help with robust campaign monitoring, so making sure that you're paying attention to, the likes of your attrition rates, you're looking at your data collection as well, making sure that you're maximizing everything you can get from that phone call, not just in terms of regular giving recruitment or regular giving conversion, but that you have focused on collecting email and phone information, SMS and opt-ins and the like. So then when it comes to face-to-face activity, you've obviously got quite a number of options here. Some of those might involve having volunteers at events or key locations within your charity or your organisation. You could go down the paid agency route. Some people do venue-based at local centres and the like, or door-to-door is another alternative. So again, these activities themselves, but it's quite similar to telemarketing in that you've got some similar considerations when it comes to all of the training and the monitoring and so on. They will promote high levels of data capture, again, worth the focus. And of course, we can help in terms of developing compelling materials, training, making sure that any kind of response packs are welcoming and engaging and the like. When it comes to digital, it goes without saying that effective and regular promotion of key activities on digital platforms can really skyrocket results. What we've often found has been that they can perform best as like a two-stage activity. What will be required is, a lot of integration with your communications team, because we need really good live tracking to evaluate performance and make sure that any conversion activity is followed up as quickly as possible. You can also do these as like, whether it's hand raising, inquirers, value exchange is another option to consider. And then even just managing really small basic things, but like your unsubscribe and your bounce back, making sure you're doing that quickly and effectively. So as I said before, we understand that your charity will have a distinct culture. We don't want to be intrusive. We will work with you to create something that's engaging, inspiring, and is really, really effective, so that our solutions are really tailored to your requirements. Okay. So as I mentioned, when it comes to regular giving, this sits within the individual giving program overall. And I don't think we're going to have time today to go through every activity in the sort of model program that we've developed. I think the most recent iteration had, it was 25 plus activities, I think, in the development side alone. So I've pulled out 10 that I think are worth focusing on, but very happy to talk about anything else at the end. Okay, so for clarity, donor development activities, these all relate to communicating with donors following their initial recruitment. So everything after that is considered development. And I have taken this is sort of, for me, this is 101 level, just because I'm not sure in terms of the broad range of experience people will have had with regular giving. So forgive me if some of this seems a bit obvious, but for the first, which is your existing regular givers, sometimes this can get missed, and this is your baseline. So this is essentially, as I say, it might seem a bit obvious, but this is your first consideration. This is what you're building the rest of the program on. So evidently we're not making any investment as such in that line in your plan. But I do think it's worth emphasizing you need to keep an eye on this. You need to track your active donors. You need to, monitor your average gifts. You need to look at your gross income on a regular basis, and attrition rates. You have to be monitoring monthly just to make sure you understand any trends or patterns or what's happening with your really valuable existing regular givers. Moving on to point 2. So this would be what's known as upgrade activity. Again, this is where regular givers, where you've got phone data, are approached by a phone call to increase their gift. We would recommend this activity is undertaken a minimum of an annual basis. I would say that existing gift data is really important, because that helps you tailor your, tailor your gift asks, and that will really enhance the success of the campaign. So I think when I was last undertaking upgrade activity, the sort of average upgrade would have been between £3 and £4. So it's obviously really useful to understand what, for example, a £36 or a £48 donation would achieve for your organisation with that uplift of 3 to 4. One thing I will emphasise is that this is a unique KPI for upgrade, but it's monitoring that uplift value, not the average gift, just to make sure you're not double counting when it comes to reporting, which I have seen happen. So again, when it comes to new regular givers who have come on board, people will ask, should I leave them? How long should I leave them for? They can be asked within the first year. Lots of places will leave it for 6 months. But ultimately the decision is yours, of course. Again, sometimes it's worth testing these things, and that is the absolute beauty of phone activity, is that you can test, turn things up, turn things off, and make the changes quite quickly. Same with face-to-face, which makes it such an effective channel. Regular givers who also give at a really high level, I would recommend they are suppressed and potentially approached in a different way. But again, that's to be determined what your perspective is of a very, very high level. But upgrade, I will tell you, is likely to give you a really super strong return on investment. This would be, if I had to pick anything off here, depending on the volumes, of course, depending on the numbers you have to approach, but this is where you'll get a really strong ROI. The next element is reactivation. So this is, again, I would strongly recommend phone for this. This is where you are approaching a lapsed regular giver with a telephone call to reactivate their cancelled gift. Again, access to prior giving is really crucial here. I think often asking them for what they gave before is very, very effective. Again, I think where you can tailor or provide information in response to what they gave before, and be able to tie that into an initial thank is really, really effective as well. Now, this could be controversial, but going forward, I think I appreciate this is perhaps ideal scenario territory, but this should be really a sort of monthly or quarterly in-house activity. Could be led by supportive services. You could have some volunteers, but I'd really say only whenever you have those processes really well established. But what you will see is a much improved conversion rate whenever it comes to undertaking these regularly. Okay, moving on to point 4, which is phone conversion. So some people would suggest going back last year. Again, all of this is going to rely on privacy policies as to how far you can go back in terms of talking to your supporters. I think you can go a lot further back, but I would suggest if you haven't done anything like this before, and people are maybe a little bit nervous, you could take your last year, so 2021 cash donors, and approach them with a telephone call to move to a regular giving ask. Again, yeah, I think taking that as a starting point and then expanding your selection. I mean, that's the other nifty thing with regular giving activity like this, is that you can roll out, success. Once you've established something and proved it and demonstrate a capacity there, then you can roll it out. I suppose a big thing for this is really being clear about your data segmentation. And again, you might want to suppress high-level asks from this activity. What we have is a really super duper useful tool called our individuals data analysis, and we can apply that to your data, and this can help whenever it comes to determine these decisions, because the outputs from that will demonstrate the propensity somebody has to give. What I would say is keep a really close eye on the attrition rate of newly converted supporters. So again, going back to your processes, that one is super duper important, as that's going to be a key indicator if anything is going wrong, or there's a failing with the messaging or the experience that the supporter has had. Okay, point 5, we've got direct mail conversion. So totally in conjunction with your previous activity of telephone conversion. So you can, obviously amalgamate messaging and make the most of the proposition that you develop and apply it across. Again, privacy policy dependent, but you are going to approach cash donors. Ideally, you could do it without the people who do, excuse me, the people who don't have telephone data. But you have a look at your data and we'll see how we can splice and dice it. You can of course combine this with other activity as well to sort of get the maximum bang for your buck. So you can tie that into whether you do retention, say postcards or materials or updates. You can obviously tie it into your, mirror with your welcome pack and so on. So, for example, we worked with Wildmar Hospice, and we delivered their very first regular giving direct mail appeals. So it was very much about bringing together modern, fresh visuals, along with really, really robust copy. So we did a bespoke campaign that tied together price points that reflected their different care provisions. And we were able to essentially, through that IDA process, look at each donor individually, adjusting their response device. And that was all about maximizing engagement. So it really did work well. We recovered lapsed regular givers. We increased new direct debit signups, which is fantastic. And we also took advantage of the situation and converted standing order donors over to direct debit. And then we also managed to achieve upgrades as part of that. Following the appeal, they then had the tools to take out and take regular giving externally. So they were able to take it to their charity shops, their receptions, resource for community fundraisers. So this is what I mean about really maximizing that product. So that was their first crack at regular giving. They were absolutely delighted, couldn't be happier, and we were too. And this is a nice endorsement from Gloria, just about the fact that we were, it was a practical solution to the need that they had. So yes, I love saying, don't take my word for it. Here's Gloria's. So just to skip back to finish off the development list. Oh, we've broken the back of half of it. So when it comes to, again, we touched on this with the example there, but when it comes to standing order conversions, this is as straightforward as it sounds. It's about taking your standing order donors and attempting to convert them to direct debit. Now, some people ask why, and I acknowledge this can be tricky because quite often, certainly in my previous experience, people didn't have their They didn't have contact details. People would have been often recruited at balls and so on. But it is worth a try because it does make things that bit more efficient when it comes to processing. Obviously, you've got that bit more control whenever it's direct debit. So you can contact a supporters bank. Some are okay, some are not. But it's, as I say, it's not an income generation activity. It's a sort of, it's really about improving stewardship and admin processes at the end of the day. You can do it through phone, you can do it through direct mail. Welcome pack. Crucially important when it comes to regular giving. Again, to state the obvious, recently recruited supporters are provided with a direct mail pack, welcoming them to the organisation. So again, a key focus of this is about maximising data capture, especially supporter motivation. So understanding when people have come on board or why they've come on board. I appreciate you'll understand, you know, if you're doing regular giving recruitment and you send out a welcome pack, you'll know the channel, but you won't necessarily know the motivation. Just a tiny hint. It's also worth remembering to record the pack dispatch on your database to avoid duplication and avoid supporter frustration. Have experienced that in the past. And again, you can maximise application of this. You can look at rollout across.
I've seen your slides, yeah.
And again, just emphasising that any offline materials.
Yeah, and then we could have a chat about it together, can't we?
And BRE. Okay, that's welcome pack.
Yeah. Okay. To who? To who? It's not work.
I am going to skirt over development mailings because I've lumped them all in together. So these are just things, elements, activities that form part of your overall programme. I'm not going to.
I'm just writing a card to Mrs. Healy. I'm thinking, you can't say things like that.
Guys, can I ask you to mute yourselves if you haven't?
You just walk in and ask if she's all right. Don't you just want to walk in and say you're right? No, because then it means I have to engage in a conversation. Oh, I've got time today. Important things to do.
Okay, I'm going to keep going. So, development mailings, things like your newsletter mailing, your
this is what
in men mailing,
that might be got money out all the time. I know, all the time.
Lottery.
I don't need to tell you it, do I?
No, you don't. Raffle, in mem.
And then when I brought up on it the other day.
Sorry, I'm going to see if I can mute. Can I mute everybody? Okay. And then we have something which I think doesn't get done enough and can be supremely effective. So that would be your phone thank yous. Again, with regular givers, that would be, you know, a lovely thing to achieve. You can do this in-house. I think it's really effective when you do it in-house, especially with volunteers or staff members. If you can't do it regularly, it's worth doing on an annual basis. I'd say in the run-up to Christmas time. So as straightforward as it sounds, regular givers with telephone data are contacted with a simple, warm, effective thank you message. Again, you can add value by gathering data, asking about gifted, asking about email opt-ins and all the rest. What I would say is if you're doing this in-house, staff training is absolutely key. To make sure the data you get back or the information you get back is in a usable format and able to upload quickly and efficiently. But yeah, I think people really, really appreciate such things now, especially post-COVID. It's phone is seen as less intrusive. Then the final element on the development plan is a little, it's just a little postcard or a little update. Something that's mailable, something that can acknowledge key milestones. So that might be things like their first gift, their 1-year anniversary. It's really recommended and it helps to counter high attrition rates. So that's why emphasizing that looking at your sort of early attrition rates are really important. So you can see whenever that sort of drop off does occur, can be really simple, stupid, just something to say thank you. Okay, so we're nearly there, folks. We're well done for hanging in this far. The recruitment plan. So I have touched on a few elements again here. This isn't everything. but it's just sort of key learnings that I have from undertaking these. So obviously getting your website right, absolutely crucial for regular giving, without a shadow of a doubt. Given the uplift in online giving through COVID, we strongly recommend you ensure that that your regular giving platform is fit for purpose. Have a look at functionality, test it, look and see if there's any improvements that can be made with your provider. Prioritize it across your site. Are you doing that? In addition, make sure that the content that you have relates to, what you're asking for at that time. Make sure it relates to live appeals. It's also worth making sure that you have whatever functionality you need to report on this platform regularly. It can often get neglected for other more labor-intensive activities. So maybe it's, linking in with the comms team or whatever to provide regular updates. But yes, I strongly recommend that you have a look at your web offering online, your regular giving offering online, and seeing, is it user friendly, and have a look at the performance of it. Is it performing for you? Okay. The second element is the take one leaflet. So this relates back to, you can tie all this back into the mail pack that we talked about. I suppose the key element with this is about having like a really smart distribution plan in place, because people develop these things and then they sit in the cupboard in their boxes and you've wasted money and you're not recruiting anybody. So making sure that these are out with, visitors, events participants, community, staff, volunteers. The other thing is making sure people are appraised as to how to use this little handy publication, because people can be a bit strange around regular giving and direct debits and, I don't know how to do that. So again, patently obvious, but keep an eye on them, have a look at your stock levels and make sure that the plan is being delivered, this distribution plan. Door drop I've included here because I think it's a good first component of a two-step approach. So this ties back to your telephone or your direct mail conversion. So you're recruiting new cash supporters through Royal Mail, and then that feeds back into your conversion activity. And you can maximize your again, your cost effectiveness by combining it with that warm direct mail activity. So when it comes to readers' appeals, so I have experience of cash regular giving, readers' appeals, and this would be where new donors are recruited through an appeal made through the local press. In my experience, it's incredibly economical. You've got to have the support of a local paper or publication. What's really important to them is that you have this bank of case studies and photos, and that can really help guarantee success as part of the pitch process. But they are, absolutely incredibly economical. The success I've had was with Maggie Centres when the Scotsman ran a reader's appeal, and in Northern Ireland, Chest Heart Stroke, when we had the Belfast Telegraph support the Help Our Babies' Hearts appeal. So can be a very inexpensive way. I think it's also one thing worth mentioning. It's useful if fundraising have direct contact with the publication as well as the comms team, for example, because there's quite technical aspects. I think often with a reader's appeal, I would endorse a coupon every time. I know it's old school, but I found it incredibly successful. But yes, you do need a broad range of effective and appropriate channels, so you could need some telephone response. So yes, and then we're coming to our last activity. We have venue. So this is, new regular givers are recruited face-to-face with specifically a regular giving ask. If you're doing anything face-to-face, that's the time to definitely, you only need one approach. So often takes place local shopping centres, garden centres, Dobies, that kind of thing. As I said, you could have an agency supporting other people, have volunteers. It can be an economical alternative, although it is time consuming to manage. So can yield excellent results, worth ensuring non-starters, anybody who has come through and yet their gift hasn't arrived or hasn't been collected, it's worth following up with them as soon as possible. And I think you also really need to have your other strong development components in place, such as your welcome, your retention, communications, and again, as before, attrition, especially if you're using an agency. Keep a really close eye on that that attrition rate, because you may have like a refund replace system in place, but also you can see if things have gone wrong. And I will flag here an experience of where we had gone in with much too high an ask, and that was coming through with a very high attrition rate, which was then adjusted and the improvement was made. So that is the recruitment element of the program. As I say, that's just part. I also have some information around really useful KPIs, but I will, looking at the time, we will draw things to a close and see if there's any questions. Thank you.
There are a few questions, Elley. The first one is just a little bit of clarity on what you meant by a mix of channels. So does that mean direct mail, social media, email?
Yep, absolutely. So I think going back to, that gives a, oh, sorry, skipping about. Yeah, I think the big thing is you can't put all your eggs in one basket, so you can't rely on direct mail to deliver what you need for regular giving, recruitment / development. It has its place for different activities, but yeah, your whole program can't be built simply around mail. I think the big thing with regular giving is you need that connection, you need that. That's why face-to-face and phone is so important when it comes to regular giving. But the thing with these channels is you need to test them and see if they're going to work for you, because there may be a reason that, you know, digital just isn't going to cut it, or, you know, I think all of them have their place, to be fair. But yes, that's what I mean by a mix of channels. So direct mail, phone, digital, yeah.
Okay, and the next question we've got, many of our donors give regularly through subscriptions to the hospice lottery. Do you have any thoughts about how regular giving through donations and through lottery interrelate?
I do. I think the big thing is I would love to know more about your lottery. I'd love to know how successful it is, and I think there has been experience before where people have felt it can compete, and you might be better putting more investment if you've got a really successful product, but you've not done a lot of, say, development or recruitment. You might be worth putting your money there first and then thinking about straight regular giving. Sorry, that's a bit. I would love to know the information. I'm guessing you've got a really successful lottery product, and that might be where putting more money is better, but it depends what you've done.
Okay, next question from Laura at Julia's house. How are people feeling about increasing regular giving activity or keeping it front of mind when the public is struggling with the cost of living increases?
Okay, well, I mean, the one thing about regular giving, or that is effective about regular giving, is that it is, by nature, it can be more affordable. So that's, I suppose, one strong message that you can put out there. I think the other thing is places understand that because of coming out of the pandemic, that things have changed for people, and there is, you know, I mean, for charities, and that the reliance on community and events activity, where you have sort of peaks of things coming through, you know, I think donors understand. To me, you're always going to have people who want to give regularly or would consider it, and you're always going to have people who will just never, you know, that's not for them. And I think the question I would ask is, are you providing them with, and the people that want to, do they have any opportunity when it comes to your organization? You know, I think Ash often talks about opening doors. I mean, essentially everything you're doing in terms of this activity is opening the door that a donor can support you in this way. And I would wonder, given the question, just how many opportunities a supporter could have to give regularly, because it does suit some people, you know, it really does, and it's their preferred method.
Okay, the next question from Alison. Do you recommend calling it something other than regular giving, for example, becoming a friend of?
Yeah, I think that definitely works for people. I think at Maggie's we had a scheme of Friends of Maggie's initially. Yeah, I think the one thing I would say is you don't want to end up in a situation where you have created a product that becomes outdated. So you want to have something that is future-proof almost, you know, in itself, in terms of your materials and your marketing, because the last thing you want to do is have, you know, this year have a circle of friends and then next year have a different kind of grouping, and that becomes an administrative difficulty, especially when it comes to how you then communicate with them about their giving. But I do think having that kind of like nice cohesive part of something, but there are ways of doing it to make sure that you don't end up in a situation where you're sort of chasing after different groups of people and creating a retention nightmare for yourself. That's what I'd worry about.
And another question from Alison. Do you have any thoughts on the ideal time for reactivating lapsed regular givers?
Do it as soon as you can. Try it as soon as you can. That's, I think, it's something that, as where I was suggesting, you can do it like I've done it both ways, in that you almost like store it up as part of your sort of annual plan, and you've got a line in your budget and it says, you know, we're going to do this in October. But if you do it and you make contact with them much quicker, because you must be communicating to them about their gift anyhow, I think you can ask them a lot sooner and you get much better reactivation rates, if that makes sense.
And the last question in the chat from Julia at Wirral Hospice. What do people use for their direct debit platforms? We've looked into it, but it's rather expensive.
Very good question. Do you mean does she mean in terms of online, or is this in terms of collection?
Online.
Okay, I'm not our online expert, so I will, unless our online expert is on, I will come back to you on that one if that's all right.
I wish I could help. I don't know.
Oh.
Sorry, I think the best thing to do in that case is to ask your peers here. So if anybody in the chat could just say what they use. A lot of it's going to have to do with how your website is built, and what plugins you can kind of insert into that to be able to collect the money. I've heard of a few specific ones multiple times, but I can't on the top of my head say what they are. So if anybody else could put in the group, that would be super.
Yeah, anything I've used before has been like a plugin into the database. So
thanks guys. Yeah, that's really helpful. Yeah, so there'll be some big names that probably work with all kinds of different websites. and then
So-
some more bespoke versions.
Enthuse, yeah, rapid data. Rapid data get a pretty good rep. Secure collections as well. Cool. Does anybody have any other questions?
Oh, there's just a last one here from Kathy. What permissions are needed to make the phone calls to supporters? We gather email opt-ins, but not phone.
Okay. You would need to, well, I think, isn't there a differentiation between landline and mobile now? So you would need a mobile opt-in. But other than that, it's, you can phone isn't like standard landline is fine. In your experience, yeah. Ash has just confirmed what I've said. Okay. Was there another question there?
Yeah, there's just one in here. In your experience, do digital ads such as display ads or Facebook ads work well in recruitment?
Okay, in my experience, they work well in recruitment, but only as a 2-stage. So not as in a straight regular giving ask. So where I have spoken to a client recently where they made a success of it is they were offering something of value. So for them, it was actually a prayer book. And then when they had the supporters' details, they contacted them by telephone to convert. And that was successful. Amy, I don't know if you...
Yeah, I guess probably the best way to think about this is to think about how you spend time online. So I think you're right, Elley. I think in terms of recruitment, as a 2-stage, that might be a better idea. So sort of hook them in with the ad. And the way that a lot of bigger organizations will hook people in is by just gathering data first off. So actually getting that person's contact details through the ad. So rather than saying, hey, do you want to do like what you've called the Holy Grail straight away by just seeing our ad for 5 seconds, what we would probably suggest you do is do a sort of a data pull rather than a, here, give us a regular gift now after seeing our ad for 2.5 seconds. So I think that tends to be how the bigger organizations like Greenpeace and other organizations like that would work. Just because you're really just not going to see a lot of response in general from Facebook ads, but especially for something as committed as regular giving. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try it. It just means that probably you're not going to see a lot of return on your investment for those. If that makes sense. Yes, no. What about TPS? TPS.
The telephone preferences service. Yeah.
Yeah, presumably you'd have to check your list against that, but as you would for everything.
Yeah, same as MPS, isn't it?
Sorry, just jumping in with my horrible croaky voice right at the last minute. There's a reason why I've not been on. Yeah, TPS, you have to check all lists, but if you, it's a publicly available list, but you have to check all lists or your phone list against TPS to make sure that you're not calling someone. However, if someone can bypass TPS by opting into phone. So if you already have a relationship and you have the landline phone number, you can still use legit interest. TPS is generally used for cold calling. But best practice is that you would check it against anyway.
I think that's one of the two immediate takeaways is your privacy statement is have a check and see, is it going to let you do any of these recommended activities or how many of these recommended activities? And then to have a look at your data collection processes and how you are collecting and managing data, because obviously if you don't have your numbers and your email addresses, it does restrict you somewhat. Are we good? How are we doing?
No more questions in the chat.
Some great questions there, so thank you. Thank you so much again for coming. I've just realized I'm still sharing. I think if you have any questions or you want to get in touch, please give us a shout at hello. Isn't that the best address, Amy?
Yeah, I'll give you a sneak peek into our email system. Basically, if you type any of our names at pebblebeachfundraising.com, you will reach any of us.
Oh.
Probably the person whose name it is. So, but yes, hello at will be picked
hello
up.
At, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's in the
and
chat.
if you have any other questions you want to dash through, fire them on. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you got something from that, and I look forward to seeing you at the next one.